Hello, my friends. Welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Eric Leclerc, subbing in for Jonah Babins. This week, we have the amazing Jonah Babins on the show. We like to call the show Uno Reverso, where I get to interview your favorite podcast hosts, Discourse in Magic's very own Jonah Babins. This episode is filled with amazing advice you can utilize to take your magic business to the next level. It is filled with tidbits and secrets and stories on how he got this mastermind project started. I certainly learned a whole lot. I loved it. I think you guys will too. Let's get right to it. Discourse in Magic, episode Who Knows with Jonah Babins. Jonah Babins, finally have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time to agreeing to do this.
Of course.
So we're doing Uno Reverso episode today. You're the one that's going to get interviewed for once because after, what is it now, 370 some episodes?
Something like that.
We don't count them anymore, do we?
No.
Yeah, after these so many episodes, you know, my name is Eric Leclerc. Thank you very much for people listening, tuning in. I pitched you on this idea because I was like, well, it must have happened already. Somebody must have had.
I get pitches on this idea every year or so, and mostly I just say no, but you got the energy, man. You got the vibe. I told Ben Ass to do it. I said, screw off, dude. I'm giving it to Eric. It's not happening.
You know, I have to tell you right off the bat a little bit about my experience with podcasts is I'm not a podcast person.
Yeah.
I've appeared on many podcasts as somebody getting interviewed, and also with Chris and Wes on their podcast, Bottom of the Barrel. And I just didn't like it. It felt like work. It felt like, you know, getting interviewed fine, but hosting with the boys, it just didn't I just felt like I was work. So I've never been a podcast person. And then recently, I don't know what made me start the Discourse in Magic series, but it's about something I'm passionate about, magic. And just the fact of different ways of consuming podcasts. Like right now, when I work out, I listen to podcasts. When I drive, I listen to podcasts. I've always been a music guy. And there's something about constantly being fed information that you care about, even though it's just in the background, it's very rewarding. It's very compelling.
Totally. I think one thing I learned about podcasts, which is so funny, is that if someone is already a podcast person, then to get them to listen to one new podcast is easy. If someone doesn't listen to podcasts, then to get someone to figure out when in their life they would listen. It's like, what am I going to do? Just sit here and stare at a wall while someone talks to me? So you have to be used to you do it when you wash dishes, you do it when you when you're in transit or whatever, working out, you know, and depending on what my life is about at the time, I listen to more or less podcasts. Now I'm really busy, but for me, I am a super podcaster. I wake up, I put in a podcast, and
Really?
from when I, brush my teeth and cook breakfast and make coffee, whatever, from then until when I sit down to work, which is 40-ish minutes, I've got something in. And there's another 2 or 3 sort of 40 or 50-minute blocks during the day where the same thing happens. So yeah, I'm banging out 2 hours a day or more of podcast.
That's amazing. And also it makes the time pass by so fast. I don't know if it's because if it's new in my life, or, I'm usually just singing my heart out in the car or whatever. Yeah. And this is just a new thing. It tricks my mind. But I was in traffic yesterday for 45 minutes, stand still. I finished a show. I was in the parking garage, stand still for 45 minutes, underground parking. And because I had Discourse on, it just flew right by. So thank you for getting me hooked on
of course.
the podcast. Really appreciate it. I think I've crushed 40 or 50 episodes so far.
Good.
And so I'd like to get started right away with something we ask everybody here on the show is, how did you get started in magic? How did you find magic, or how did magic find you?
I know you've only listened to 40 or 50 episodes, but you got this down pat. You got this really good. I started magic when I was a kid. My uncle did D-lights for all of the nieces and nephews. And yeah, he was just a fun guy. And, after doing so many of these interviews, I used to think that when you see a magician, if the magician's like good enough, then you get hooked on magic. But I've since changed my belief, which is that I think that if you are the type of person that has the magic-y problem-solving-y brain, like you like these kind of puzzly things and problem-solving-y things, maybe a little bit of creativity, whatever, if that's you and you see magic, then you're screwed. Then this is just what you have to do now forever. So yeah, I saw him doing D-lights early. I was obsessed with it for my kindergarten show and tell. I brought him in to show everybody the D-lights and to show everybody what he did.
But at this point, you must have known that they were thumbs.
Eventually, he told me. I don't remember.
He told you, okay? You never.
No. I was very young. I was probably 5, right? Like, very, very young. And I don't know, at some point it just kept going and going. I think when everyone finds out that you like magic as a kid, I have a big family and, there's a lot of Jewish holidays with Hanukkah and gifts and whatever, just everyone is feeding that, you're getting magic kits and you're getting this and going to Browser, the magic shop in Toronto and going to this and that. And so it just slowly sort of kept growing and growing, and there's different turning points and different moments that time I thought I would kind of get out of it or get into it, especially, but that's kind of how it started. Is just my uncle was a very, how do I say this cleverly? I think a worldly guy, so he would like go see this in Vegas, or he'd go here or he'd go there, and he just like collected cool things and did cool things and led a cool life. So he just showed D-lights to all the kids. He still does, and I just loved it. I just got hooked on it.
It's 2 things I want to touch here. The first one is the Jewish culture. I had a Jewish girlfriend for a couple of years, and I was immersed in their culture, which I loved, by the way. I loved living in a Jewish household during COVID. We were in the Hamptons, but besides the point, Passover was amazing, all this. But it seems like magic is more prevalent in a Jewish child's life with bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. There's just something. What is it? Why is it more?
I'll say a couple of weird things about it. So I agree. Obviously, there's also a lot of famous magicians who are Jewish, but there's a couple things. I think the first thing is that Jews really encourage education a lot, which I think has some overlaps with magic. But I'm going to say the really weird thing out loud, which is, I forget the statistic, but it's something crazy that Jews are a half of a percent of the world's population. And they're like 60% of all, what's that award in science? Gosh, what the heck?
Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize. Yeah. And there's different questions as to why, but one potential reason is that in every generation, Jews at some point are persecuted and they are chased out of their land and they have to go figure it out somewhere else and they have to problem solve. And if you believe in the evolution of it all, like the really clever guys are the ones that escape persecution and escape trying to get murdered. So there's this thing where Jews are kind of clever. And maybe the reason I described is why, maybe not. It's the best reason that I have to understand. But it's just, you get a lot of engineers and a lot of problem solvers and doctors and lawyers, and Jews are clever. And it's not always true, obviously. But, as a broad idea, I think there's something to whether it's the nature or the nurture that we see a lot of clever industries where someone needs to be more smart than athletic. You don't see a lot of Jews in the NBA, right? But you don't see a lot of Jews in major league sports, but you do see them in things that are more problem solving-y and things like that. And other cultures you see in more things than others and whatever. So every culture has their own things that they, maybe dominate at. But I think there's something about cleverness in Judaism that aligns with magic.
That makes a lot of sense. The second thing I want to touch on that you mentioned is going to the magic store. There's no doubt that a brick and mortar magic store close to where you grow up is He instrumental in convincing your parents to go, asking for magic props for Christmas, for your birthdays, the community of magicians that usually hang around the magic store. You had one of the best in Toronto. There was a couple in Toronto, but you had magic stores at your disposal. At what point did you go from like the 4-year-old liking the coin tricks to spending $20 on one trick?
I mean, look, when I started going, the graduation is from like magic kits to the magic shop, so that graduation happened, whatever. Let's imagine I was 11 or 10 or something like that.
Right.
And I started buying tricks, and I have to shout out Ben Train because growing up, it was so funny. Obviously, I'm going to talk back about the magic shop, but, growing up, we met at Sorcerer Safari at the Canadian Magic Camp.
You and Ben, or you and I?
Both, all of that, right?
Oh, really? You met Ben Train at Sorcerer Safari Magic?
I maybe met him in Toronto, but we sort of knew each other a little bit more because of Sorcerers. I don't really remember.
Like spending a week in the woods together.
No, sorry. I met him at a Jewish summer camp where he was in charge of giving candy to all the kids, and someone told me that I had to meet this guy, and we met, and then a couple of years later I went to Sorcerers. But I remember very vividly me going to the magic shop. After when I started going to the magic shop, I was done with kits. I was just buying stuff. I was buying the coin tricks and gimmick decks and things like that. And I remember him saying to me, asking him for advice, and him saying to me like, I'm happy to give you advice, but I'm probably just going to encourage you to buy books. So I think that I bought stuff until he told me to buy books. Obviously, he made me buy Expert at the Card Table, which is such a stupid thing to get a child to buy. But, he encouraged me to buy books. So I think I was mostly just going there and buying tricks and tricks and tricks and tricks. And then slowly, it kind of all happened together. It's like going to Sorcerers, and, I had bought a couple of DVDs like Jay Sankey. And then also during that time is when downloads started to be a thing, like with Penguin and Theory 11. And then I was buying books. So like there was this transition probably around 15 years old where I went from buying tricks and things to buying books and videos and things like that. But I still have a giant drawer of tricks and I know you've got a room full of them, but I think like there really only was a 10-year period in my life, 5-10-year period where I bought magic stuff. Now every now and again I'll buy a thing, but like mostly now I buy books, and I buy working with someone or something like that. I don't really buy tricks so much anymore. So there was a little period.
And Ben was really part of your kind of circle, a mentor, or like kind of like your guider.
If you remember Tyler Williams, who I used to do this podcast with.
Yes.
Tyler and I used to worship the ground that Ben walked on. Now used to, yeah. Now I live with him. I know he's a little shit, but I used to worship the ground that he walked on, and he was. Now, he's a performing magician, and he does his act, and he has his 15 close-up tricks and his 10 tricks that he does on stage. But back then he did a lot of technical sleight of hand that was very difficult and doing really unique things that we had never seen before. And even at Magic Camp, we weren't terribly close. We knew each other. We had jammed. He was my counselor and then CIT, and then we were both counselors together. I vividly remember him leaving a message on my parents' answering machine saying that Mike Siegel, the one who runs the camp, told him that I was his CIT, and he tried to trade me for a ham sandwich, but they said no, so I'm stuck with him, which was just a cute little stupid message. But I think back when I lived in Vaughan, which is like north of Toronto, the magic shop was these characters, and it was an hour away. Like it was still an hour away, right? So I would take public transit for an hour to Mission all the way down to the shop to go spend a couple hours there and then come back.
Right.
So he was one of the cast of characters that I would see there, and he organized some lectures and stuff and workshops in Toronto. And then I saw him at camp. So pre-camp, he was an inspiration, but like at an arm's length. I was very interested in what he and some other people were doing. Post camp, or in the later years of it is when, we started working together and we started doing a bunch of other things together. So he played a big role in different ways.
You mentioned, throughout this whole series too, we mentioned Sorcerer's Safari a lot. And I don't know if you ever spent 5 minutes talking about this place. I think we just mentioned thinking like people know what it is or what it, but it doesn't exist anymore. But I think we should have you ever talked about it?
Yeah, we did an episode where we interviewed Mike Siegel and Tyler and I back in the day talked about it a lot because it's
the most magical place.
Yeah. And it really was part of the foundation of this podcast was Tyler and I were in the same cabin every year at the camp. Basically what it is like a lot of people know what Tannen's Magic Camp is. Yeah. And Tannen's is a magic camp that takes place on a campus. Yeah. So it's kind of like magic school. And Tannen's is the most incredible thing ever. Everybody that goes loves it. The best magicians come out of it. So like,
yes, 100%.
It is, but it's a magic school in the summer. Yeah. But Sorcerer Safari, let me go back a half step. In Ontario specifically, there's a very big culture of overnight camp that doesn't exist everywhere else in the world. In Ontario.
Really?
Yeah, there's a big, like if you go to, anywhere that has Ontario's landscape. So there's some places in the States that have the kind of up north idea, and going to the country and whatever. But most cities don't have this. Like in Vancouver, nobody goes to summer camp. That's not what people do in their summer. They don't go to an overnight camp. So you mix this overnight camp of Ontario with Tannen's, and you end up with Sorcerer Safari, which is 150 people up at a camp, separated by age group in cabins. This isn't in dorms. This is in legit cabins. And your counselors are all of Canada's most famous magicians and most well-known magicians. There's a dozen 20 or so special guests that year, ranging from people that are coming back to someone who they got to bring in. And you wake up, you go to breakfast, then everyone goes to card course. Then there's a field activity and where you're all supposed to be playing football, but instead everyone's just, doing card tricks with each other. And then later there's an elective. So 4 magicians line up and they say, okay, go with this guy if you want to learn straight jacket escape. Go with this guy if you want to learn spoon bending. Go with this if you want to learn mentalism. And then you go. And then after that is swim. And everyone gets their bathing suit and goes down to the water and does card tricks with each other. And then you have dinner. And then you spend time, and then there's an evening show, and then late night, if you're a staff or something, there's something else. And that's for a week. And they rent out a gorgeous camp up in...
Well, that's what I was going to say, is a big part of it is the actual venue. Yeah. This camp has been in like Hollywood films as the stereotypical summer camp where there's long cabins and a huge mess hall. And it's, so Sorcerer Safari happened on the last weekend of
it would be when all of the camps, when the camp is done with the people that actually go to the camp, they would rent out the camp.
The kids would actually go to school a week late.
Yeah, it was something like that. Something like that.
We had a lot of Americans too. Yeah. But anyways, great magical place. Everybody there was a volunteer. I volunteered my time there for, I think I went 6 or 7 years. Yeah. It was one of the weeks I looked most forward to. It was just
same here.
I know Ben's nodding his head right now on the couch. Yeah. Okay, so from and then on, what did you start doing? When did you start? You were going to school full time? Did you want to do magic full time? Like, what was the plan?
So funny enough, I finished. So camp ended in 2016, and I graduated university in 16
with an honors math degree.
Yeah. And it was really funny because around 2010, 2011, 2012, when I was like 16 or 17, people hired me every now and again for a gig of synagogue or this or that or whatever. And I remember people asking me like, do you want to be a magician professionally? And you will not believe what I said. I said, I like magic, but the whole marketing thing and having a website and doing this, I have no interest in that, which is hysterical because I'm like literally the opposite of that right now.
What date was this, Jonah? Because I have some. No, around what year?
Probably 2011.
Okay, right. Oh well, that wasn't when it ended.
No, when what ended?
What Sorcerer Safari ended in
No,
20.
Sorcerer Safari ended in, I think, 2016 or
But you were at that point, you were still saying, I'm not really interested
no.
in.
So let's say 2011 is when I was like, I don't really care about marketing. I care about, the magic tricks. During university, something really interesting happened, which is at the ends of high school, so 2011, 2012, I was working at a day camp in Toronto doing I was kind of a counselor, kind of doing magic workshops, kind of doing a bunch of stuff. And then one camp hired me once outside of that to go do a week of workshops. And I made I don't know, $1,500 or something in a week. And I was like, what am I doing working at this day camp every day for $5,000 for the whole summer when I could be doing this? And this magician came to the day camp, who I know who it is now, I'll tell you later, but this magician came to the day camp and to perform for all the staff. And the staff had to buy tickets to go see the show. And I was this sour kid, and I was like, I cannot believe that the camp director hired someone else. He knew that I was a magician. I literally work at the camp teaching magic, and he hired some other guy to do magic. So I was like, I'm not going to the show. Screw that. I'm not going.
You didn't know who the magician was?
No idea. I didn't care. I was like, I'm not going. The next day, I started hearing the buzz that the show was so bad that the camp gave all the staff their money back on the ticket. And I said, well, wait a second. If this guy can go to camps and suck,
and get paid.
For sure he got paid, right? I'm like, if this guy can go to camps and suck, I can go to camps and ideally not suck, but he still got paid, man. I can figure this out, man. If he's doing this that poorly and still alive, I can probably do this. So I did what anybody else would do when they didn't know what to do, which is I asked my mom, and I was like, what on earth do I do? How do I get into camps? And she's been entrepreneurial a lot. And the next day she somehow gathered a list of 150 camp directors' email addresses in Ontario. And that next summer we emailed 150 camp directors. I wrote the worst email ever. And I did everything wrong in business with the whole thing. But I quoted $1,500 to come to the camp, do workshops with all the campers, do a show for a week. For a week. So I'd go for 4 days or 5 days, do workshops with all the campers. At that point, I was too afraid to do a camp-wide show. But I did a staff show, workshops with all the campers, and I charged $1,500 for 4 or 5 days. And then camps would be like, yes. I'm like, because you said yes, I'm going to make it 1,300 because I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I booked 5 camps, man, so I made $7,000 traveling up to camps doing this in 6 weeks. And I was like, what was I doing?
Good on your mom, Sylvia, for giving you that list.
Nice. Good memory. I was like, what was I doing, at these, at working at the day camp? So year over year, I just expanded and kept emailing every camp again, be like, me again, you want to do it this year? Me again, you want to do it this year? And it grew and grew and grew. And that happened through university when I was studying math. And by the time I graduated university, my summer was making me $20K, July and August. And I was just like, why would I? And all my math friends were all doing math internships in the summer. So the combination of me having a summer that was making me good summer money and my friends actually having that, no one wanted to hire me to do math. I don't even think I really understood the concept that you go to university to study something and that still no one wants to hire you. Then you have to go and figure it out and whatever. I just thought maybe I would be really hireable with a math degree, which turns out to be not the case. And then I just said, fuck, if I can do 20K in 2 months, I can probably make this thing work. And that was 2016. And in that year, I started doing everything. So I started doing gigs. I started this podcast with Tyler, and I started producing public shows with Ben. So I was just like, let me throw everything at this and try every possible thing and sort of see what ends up working. And what I learned, just as a little summary, is that everything will work. You just have to pick the one to work. It's not like I'm going to do these 3 things and one will pop off. It is the thing I work on will work. So Right. So for us, just to fast forward to now, we officially stopped doing public ticketed shows. We'll maybe do 1 or 2 a year, but instead of 2 or 3 a month. And there's magicians who are very successful doing public ticketed shows, but it's my third priority. After the podcast and the mastermind, and then after gigging and booking out Ben, and then it's public shows. So of course it's not going to be the best thing ever. But I was a rookie at entrepreneurship then, and I just thought one of these things will pop off, and that's what I'll do. And that's basically when I got serious about all 3 of them.
I have just today, I was listening, it was an episode with Gazo that you put out in 2017. And I'm going to throw this date out, April 13, 2017, where I think it was your first multi-magician marketing offering. It was called Fantastic Gigs and Where to Find Them.
Fantastic Gigs and Where to Find Them, yeah.
Was that your first time you were like, I can teach magicians to kind of...
Was that the first one?
Or it was green. It was, you were green. It was
I did something, I believe, before that. Let me see if I can look it up here. But I did something, I believe, before that, which was, the thing is online, you're just afraid to sell stuff. I was, you're just like afraid, you're like, what if people don't like it, whatever. So I think before that, I ran a week-long free training called 4 Gigs in 4 Days, which I don't have the exact date of, but
it was around there.
Around there, I see that. What was the date that you had there?
I had April 13th, 2017. You start. So
I guess that may be first, because what I'm seeing is I created this
sounded
group.
Like it to me.
I created this group October 3rd, 2017. So yeah, I don't even, Fantastic Gigs and Where to Find Them. Then I did 4 Gigs in 4 Days. And then after that, I did, what was it called? The Magician's Guide to Getting Gigs. So yeah, around 2017 is when I started doing it.
So right before we dive into that, because I mean, what you're doing right now, though, I really want to get into this mastermind thing that you're doing, but I just want to talk about your parents a little bit, Josh and Sylvia.
How do you remember their names? How did you find it somewhere?
No. I just remember you talking about them, but you've never talked about, you graduated with honors with a math degree, and I'm sure both your parents being Jewish are like successful, and they have the business ethic you have. But when you told them, was there a point where you told them, I want to try this? Like, was it before graduation, after? Like, what did that look like for your parents? Were they supportive?
So I'll tell a little story here, but first I'm going to go back a minute, which is that both of my parents have entrepreneurially done real quirky stuff. My dad used to work at a store called, which you may remember, a store called the It Store. Do you know what that is?
I love the It Store.
Right. So my dad worked at the It Store for about 10 years before he made his own version of that called Make 'em Laugh, which lasted about 6 years. And my mom worked at It Store head office. So think about this quirky place. It's like they're selling lava lamps and t-shirts with things on them and weird board, right, and weird board games. It's like this dark store and little plushies, just like the weirdest stuff, right? So they both worked there. My dad then went on to be a wholesaler for Halloween
stuff. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And then my mom started a company with her 2 brothers called Laugh Rat, where they made it looks like medication, but it's actually candy. So they're novelty products. So it would be called like Dadville, like take 2, give it to your dad and tell him to shut the hell up. Or like, like one was called like Fuck It All. And it'd be like
sold at the It Store too. They sold those at the
at many different ones of these stores. So they both did really quirky things like that. Now my dad does something similar. My mom works for a coffee company, but like during growing up, I remember walking into school and my mom being on the phone being like, well, they ordered 12 pallets of Hornitos, so they have to get the Hornitos. And I'm just like, what it was like a joke about Doritos or whatever. It's like, so like they've both been in this weird entertainment-y space for a while. So I think like it's no surprise that I got into magic and something sort of interesting and quirky. I remember conversations with both my parents. I remember on the phone in a car ride with my fraternity talking to my parents I was in the back and someone was telling, and they were asking me like what I'm going to do next. And I was like, I think I'm going to try magic. And my mom just was losing it. She was just losing it about that. I think she thought it was crazy. And especially, after having gone through the whole degree, and it was difficult. And my dad wanted me to, after when I spoke to him, he wanted me to get an advanced degree in math, which, I understand from their perspective that it's like you get more degrees, become more employable, whatever. But I think if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know for what you're getting the degree for, which I barely knew why I was getting the math degree. I was just like, math is interesting. I have to go to university. So like, I guess this is what I'm going to do. It's really silly to just get an advanced degree with no path and no goal. And I have to thank my brother, because my parents were sort of fighting. Yeah. My parents were sort of fighting with me a little bit about it. And my brother said, like, give him a year. Like, give him a year. If it doesn't work, he can always go and get another degree and go get a job somewhere. He's like 22 or something, So just give him a year to figure it out. And in a year, that was 2016, just things started working. I started doing shows with Ben at Dave & Buster's, which was every Friday and Saturday, 2 shows a night. And then I was booking gigs, and then I was doing the podcast. And then I moved from my parents' house to Toronto with just magic money, right? Just like nondescript, just money from stuff, And I think they had seen me work, and they just said, yeah, fuck it, I guess give it a whirl. And now they like my mom does my taxes, and she's like, I don't know what's going on,
Yeah, I know. You're now they're seeing you crush it. I think I remember telling you telling me at Sorcerer Safari, your dad was like something about like, he's like, you're not a magician, you're in sales or something like that. Like, you remember your dad saying like, your job is not magic, your job is sales.
I believe that, but I don't remember that conversation. But, I think over time I learned that that's true, right? Is that like, the doing of the magic is the fun part, like is the icing on the cake. It is the getting of gigs. And like, there's plenty of really great magicians that don't work. And so like being a really great magician is not the part that it takes to be a successful magician. And that also took me a long time to learn, is that like getting better at magic or adding one trick, obviously it's important. And like your show is the product, but in every industry we know it's not always the number one best musician that is the most popular. It's not the person who spent the most time learning guitar and can do the most complicated scales, that can do it. There's a lot more to it, to being successful in every industry. So I learned that slowly.
And then when did this like passion for marketing? Is it when you were like, it kind of became like, well, if I'm going to do this full time, I need to sell myself, and I need to, or were you trying a bunch of stuff, throwing the spaghetti, seeing what sticks? Were you reading a lot of self-help books or like marketing books? Where did that unlock?
So in the tail end of university, when I was starting to have doubts that I was going to be doing, I started, funny enough, to go back to the beginning of this podcast, getting really into podcasts, because podcasts, one of my flavors about it, especially at the time, is like podcasts sort of surrounds the field of education. So like where other forms of media, like watching videos on YouTube, may not be all about education, like I found that podcasts were really about education, or at least the ones that I was listening to. And there was a couple of different podcasts that I listened to at the time that made a big impact in what I was doing and learning. So the first one was a podcast by Pat Flynn, which I believe still exists. He's not a magician, and it's called the Smart Passive Income Podcast. And he's basically talking about making money online, and it's great podcast, really interesting. And it just helped me start thinking about making money online. So I listened to Pat Flynn's The Smart Passive Income Podcast. I listened to there was a podcast called The Successful Performer Cast by Chris Shepard, which was another podcast that a magician did. There was the Magician's Business podcast, which has since been bought by Ziv Raviv. So there was a handful of podcasts that I was listening to at the time that were just giving me ideas in terms of marketing and getting me excited about the fact that I could do marketing and that I could sell and do this and do that. And I think one thing that I don't talk about so much is that because those podcasts helped me understand the idea of like making money on the internet, I knew that if I had a big audience, I could sell something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that like the way to make money. Now I know you can also run ads, but like you also, if you have a big market, if you have a big audience of people that follow you, then you can sell something. So one of the reasons why I started the podcast is I just was listening to enough of these marketing, online business, whatever things to say, I have no idea what I'm going to sell, but if I start a podcast and build an audience, at some point in the future, I will have an audience to sell something. And early on, I got like affiliate links from magic websites. Like I got an affiliate link from like Vanishing Ink's website. So if someone bought through me, then I would get a kickback, or if they bought from this magic thing through me, then I would get a kickback. So I tried a lot of different versions of these things. I also made a t-shirt, a Discourse and Magic t-shirt, which 60 people on the planet have. And I still see it every now and again at a convention, someone brings it out. But I had the foresight to know that with a big audience, I would be able to sell something. And I knew that I didn't yet know what that was. So wow. I tried many things on the journey. And honestly, when this really kicked off, I mean, I've subscribed to the thinking of online business and marketing of learning out loud, which is like, if I just share what I learn as I learn it, people will really listen and like it. And then I can, charge for implementation. So those early courses was basically me selling that system that my mom did for me for summer camps and saying, hey, you guys do it. And like over the course of 6 or 7 years doing summer camps, me learning how to raise prices and how to send emails and how to use software to do it and all that stuff. That's what those early courses were about. The second jump of the marketing stuff is, this is sort of a long-winded answer, but is in COVID, I had sold a couple marketing things here and there. I wrote a book called Your First 5 Gigs that I sold pre-COVID, just before COVID. And again, I guess you can get it somewhere, but not really. I mean, message me if you want it. And in COVID, when COVID hit, all of the gigs were canceled. Ben and I were each doing gigs separately. COVID, the Toronto Magic Company became me booking Ben and I, and not just us booking ourselves separately in Toronto Magic Company doing public shows. But in COVID, the government said, we'll pay you a couple $100 a week because you have no job. And the way it worked in Canada was if you make a certain amount of money from your work, then we won't pay you. So it was this funny thing where it was like, okay, well, if I put effort into making some money, then I'm not going to get the free money from the government. And so like, what do I do here? Do I try to make other money or do I just try to get paid from the government? And Ben said to me like, bro, we have an opportunity here to sit and do nothing for who knows how long and just enjoy a well-earned break and just relax and whatever. We were doing a lot of public shows at the time. And then I said, I feel like everyone's going to go to sleep and this is a really good time to do the opposite and go really hard. And we started doing virtual shows and I just started teaching every possible thing that I knew in little workshops through the podcast. I'd run a workshop about
the podcast, these little 9-minute tidbits of gold.
Yes, but also I would do a workshop where I would say, hey, I'm doing a workshop teaching you how to set up your video and background or do a virtual show. Or, hey, here's a software I use for virtual show. I'm just going to teach you guys what it is and how to use it. Or here's how I price my virtual shows and here's how to do it. And from that, again, I knew maybe I would be selling some help, but from that, people asked me, they're like, do you teach this stuff? Can I hire you? Whatever. And then that was early on in the podcast, I launched something called Magiq, MAGIQ, Magicians Accountability Group in Quarantine. And the idea was like, I'm going to teach some stuff, but mostly we're just going to all be pumped together that we can like work on magic and book virtual shows and record stuff and like just do things. So that was the second real jump. When Ben and I had some really great years in COVID, I was like, let me teach all of this stuff. And then it transitioned into in-person and then me teaching that and more and more and more. So like the mastermind is only, I guess 2024 coming on 2025. The mastermind is only 3 and a bit years old. The coaching is about 4 and a bit years old in the format that it has now. Again, I've done books. I've done courses. I've done video courses.
Yeah.
I've done one-on-one.
Setting yourself up. You were building your...
who knows, right? Like who knew that? But just the format that it is now is basically 3 to 4 years old from COVID when it started to build itself out.
If there's one thing I retain from all of this is just do the thing. Just do the fucking thing. Do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever talk about how successful this mastermind project or business is, but you know, I've reached out in the last month or a couple of months or so to tell you on my side, from my angle, the waves that I've been feeling, not being part of it, but you know, I have friends and whatever, and you guys are killing it. You've created something special, and there's been my whole career in magic. There's been like, I think my first one, the internet had just come out. I bought like Randy Sharrock's Millionaire Magician or something. It was a course like that. And there's always been courses on, you know, promising you these things, double your salary, 3x, 4x, whatever. And that's what these programs do, is they promise you things. But I'm here to say, this is not an ad. This is not why we're doing this podcast, but I really feel like we had to talk about how successful it is. And I've had, you know, so much successful that I'll tell the story that I told you that before I first called you, is that as Canadian magicians, you know, Wes and I, we've been busy forever. We've been busy. November, December is our time, crushing it, shows, let's go. They always come in. And I am a little bit ashamed, I've told you this before, to say that I have never, besides business cards and a website, never advertised, never cold called, never. And I know this is it's crazy to think of, but I've managed to get successful, you know, I think a bit more than my peers. And I could never talk about me not advertising. I'm never on the yellow pages, never online, because it was embarrassing. I just had a good show. And, you know, I delivered a good show. That's what I did as my marketing, you know. And now this season, we were seeing the calendar come, and I'm like, I call Wes, I'm like, how are your November, December gigs? Like, and he's in Toronto and I'm in Ottawa. Toronto's 4 million people, Ottawa's 1 million, Montreal is 2 million people away. That's our big, like, you know, trifecta of like cities. And he's like, not good. I don't know what's going on. It's the first time this ever happens. And as I started digging, I saw that the gigs were going to the magicians who subscribe to your mastermind.
Yeah, and you know who they are. The ones in Montreal and Ottawa, you know who they are.
Yeah, we know who they are, and not necessarily that they're better or working harder, but it's times are changing. The way people book magicians is different now. You told me a great thing that really stuck with me, and it was like, before it was like, oh, we had a magician. Let's say I do a corporate party for, you know, PricewaterhouseCoopers. We had a magician a couple of years ago who was really good. People really liked the idea. And the booker is going to have this company. What was his name? Oh, I don't remember. The booker still has the idea of magician in their head. So they're going to get on their phone and go magician Toronto and boom, boom, and boom, boom. And then like they'll see the website with the magicians, your promotional materials in order, looking great, exactly what they need, what the masterminds taught them. And they'll book. Better than that. Oh no, I got this guy. And if they ever say, did you ever get the name of the magician? No, I got a guy here. People like the now, booking now through my hands, through my fingers. And if they fall into that little kind of wormhole of like, oh, trying to search, the mastermind people I'm talking about around our city are going to get those gigs, which is crazy, which goes so much to say about what you've put in place. Do you want to talk a little bit about not necessarily like numbers, but like what you've accomplished?
I'll talk about a couple different things. The first is, you know, your situation goes back to what we were talking about before, about quality of magic versus, you know, working on the business, which is like, you've always been really good at magic. You had a really good show, and you've had a couple of agents pick you up and book you, and you've had a couple other people pick you up and book you. And this is this like really tough dichotomy in the arts, which is like, you have to be good to get booked and to get rebooked. But being good is not necessarily the thing that, and like, you know, for me, it's not about like, you could just be really good, get booked, word of mouth, people, you're like, cool, that's fine. The challenge is, on what pedal do I press on when the numbers don't look like what I want them to? And that is a skill. It just is a skill that needs to be learned. So it's like, if I'm like, you know, I was once chatting with a magician, one that you know, and he told me, next year, I'm going to do 180K. I said, what did you do this year? He said, like 130K. I'm like, don't, man. What are you going to do to make an additional 50? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I'm just saying I want 180K, right? And I'm like, okay, I understand. You're going to do hope marketing, right? So I think that, you know, being good is so important. And you are such a great example of that. You just know awesome people. You're just really good. Agents have picked you up. People have booked you. If someone knows you, that's great. But then when the time comes and you're like, I need it to be a little bigger this year, I want it to be a little bit more. Those are the skills that, you know, you need to learn. So I think there's a lot to it. Talking about maybe some of the marketing things and the mastermind. Like, look, mastermind's about three things. It's about generating leads, making sales, and the operations of the business. So generating leads, there's a lot of different places where leads come from. There's all of the inbound versions like Google Ads or SEO or gig sites or people inquiring with you. There's the outbound versions, which is like cold calls or cold emails or DMing people on LinkedIn or whatever. And then there's the past client relationships. All of these things are important, and you can make your business out of one of them if you want. But also, if you build out the systems to make it work, if you've got ads running and you've got SEO working and you've got all these things working in your favor, well, then start cold emailing. You know, if you've got a great relationship with your past clients and that's helping you get rebooked all the time, amazing. Start running ads, you know? So the leads is about really like all of the, we've classified every way a magician can get leads. And every way the magician can get leads, we have trainings on. And not all of it from me, right? One of the cool things about the mastermind is some of these people that are doing 200 and 300, 400K a year in magic, like they're teaching what they're doing, right? So every way to get leads, that's in there. And then there's the sales. The sales is how much you charge. It's what your sales pipeline looks like how you talk to them on the phone, what the follow-ups are like, what the emails are like, all of those bits. Then there's the promo material and how to make yourself look really good. And again, those are elements that you wouldn't need to know. Like, you don't need to know that what your website needs to look like. You make a website, you put a bunch of images on it, and you're like, okay, whatever. Now I have a website. People can find me now. But it's like, yeah, there's people whose jobs it is that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for big tech companies to increase the conversion rate on a website, like the number of people that fill out the form, by 5% or 10%, which means for 100 people that go on the website, instead of 5 filling out the form, 10 fill out the form. But think about it. That's a difference of like $10,000 for us. Right? Number of people that actually choose to fill out the form. So these kinds of things, what the marketing should look like, how much you should charge, and how much you should charge is based on where you're at, where you're going, the marketing material you have, the number of leads that you have, the market that you're in. So it's not a, hey, everybody, you should be $3,000. Like, it depends on a lot of information. You know, you do corporates and schools, and those are different. You get paid different things to do those. And then the last is systems, which is, as time goes on, these things get out of hand. Like, if all your systems are working, I got like 1,000 leads this year, like 1,000 people inquired this year. That I cannot handle sending emails. I cannot handle do it. I need a CRM and a way to keep all of that organized and remember who booked, who didn't book, who almost booked, I never want to talk to them again. I need someone else to manage that for me. I'm not the one sending the emails, because if I send 1,000 emails, I learned during COVID, just a little side tangent. During COVID, I'd be on pitching a virtual show, and an inquiry would come in for a virtual show. And I had 2 other calls coming up. And by the time I got off all these calls and I called that person back, they said, sorry, we found someone already.
Wow.
And I went, oh, it would pay to just have someone sitting by the frickin' desk to email them. If all they did was just email them and say, got it.
Yeah.
Right. Got it. Jonah will call you in 20 minutes. Okay, perfect. Receive. Here's some promo. Take a look at it. He'll call you in 30. Like, just to have someone standing there, would make a big difference. That was when I started the hiring. So anyways, for systems, you need some sort of CRM and way to be organized, and all the software that you use. You need hiring at some point, basically around 150K. You should probably think about hiring someone. And then the last, which is kind of important, but it just is the last in this world of things, is work-life balance, which is, there's a lot of things I just named. There's a lot of things to work on. You're doing magic shows, you're doing sales calls, you're sending emails, you're working on a website, whatever. You got to make sure that this isn't like you have 3 jobs, right? Like, we're here, we're doing this because we get to not be working a 9-to-5 job somewhere. That means you got to make sure that put your vacations in your calendar. You got to make sure that we've got something called a 10-hour rule, which is like, if you're working for more than 10 hours in your business every week, you're doing something wrong. Okay. So if you're working for 20 hours, whatever you're doing, automate it, hire someone to do it. If it's working, if it's not working, stop doing it. Okay. It's not worth your time. So we have these different things to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. We don't want to wake up, work 8 hours, then get ready and then go do a show and then come back and then do that same thing. That's not what this whole thing is all about. So those are all the elements of the mastermind. And when the mastermind started, I know I'm going on a little rant here, but when the mastermind started, it was just like me teaching the stuff that I know. But what's been really amazing about the group that has really surprised me and been incredible is that as time goes on, if it was 90% Jonah's ideas and 10% other people's ideas, as time goes on and the group grows and people have different expertise, it's now come closer to like 40% Jonah's ideas and 60% other people's ideas. And we got people that are totally crushing it that say, hey, here's my exact system for SEO. Copy it. Hey, I do school shows. I do 2 shows during the day and then I do a show at night for the whole family. Copy it. Hey, here's what I use to book $10,000 a month from Bark, one of the gig websites. Copy it. And all of a sudden, we have everybody's playbooks for all of the best things that everybody does. And when someone has a challenge, instead of me saying, hey, call me, let me help, I'm like, bring it to the group call and you're going to get 15 great ideas about what to do about this thing. And from people from all over that do these kinds of things all over. Like right now, we've been jamming on this idea of like how to get Google reviews. After a gig, how to get a Google review. So for the last, like maybe 6 months ago, I came up with this system called the post-show call, or after the show, you call the client, you talk about it, you got all these different things you say, and then you ask for the Google review. I have the system of how to do that on the Discourse and Magic website. Everyone can get it. It's for free. Just scroll down, you'll find it. And then there's got all these other great ideas people come up with. One is that you should have one of those business cards that has an RFID, and when you tap it, it brings up your Google review. So people come up to you afterwards, they say, hey, the show was great. You say, what'd you like about it? Oh, you were so funny. I know this is crazy. Can you tap this and leave a review on Google? That'd be really awesome. Okay, then we learned this idea that after the show, instead of asking for a review on the stage, you ask people to come say hi. Because if they come say hi, you have a swarm of people around you that are there to say hi, you can ask each of them to do a review. If we do it from the stage, no one's going to remember to do it. So all of a sudden, people went from getting 0 reviews to 1 review per show to 5 or 6 reviews per show. And this is all because of the community. If it was just me, everyone would have got their 1 review per show with their post-event call. Now, everyone's getting 5 or 6 5-star reviews per show. So it's these kinds of things that has really surprised me about it, is how much of a community the whole thing is and how much people are relying on each other and helping. And people, I'll talk to someone and go, oh yeah, I was on a 2-hour call with this guy in the mastermind like a couple days ago. And it's awesome. So I'll share one stat that I learned just to wrap up this part, or if there's anything else you want to ask, please do. But the one stat that I learned is that we track revenue. So every month people fill in what their monthly revenue was from magic bookings, because we got to make sure the numbers are going up. If the numbers aren't going up, I'm doing something wrong, they're doing something wrong, someone's doing something wrong. And I get to see the pulse of what's going on. And if someone all of a sudden drops, I call them, I say, hey dude, what's going on? Like we got to maintain certain caliber of people. What are you doing, dude? You got to, pick up the pace, right? From this year, from the last 12 months, so I guess from November 30th back to old December 1st, the average revenue is $107,000. So the average person in the mastermind is doing over $100K a year. And the mastermind itself is like 40 some odd people. So it's like over $5 million a year of people doing these strategies and implementing this stuff, which is awesome. It's awesome that this is now an army of people that are sharing their best ideas with each other. And I'll say one last thing about it, because you mentioned all these courses of people having these like guarantees. You're going to make this, you're going to make that. I have 3 guarantees with working. First guarantee is a 2-week taco guarantee, which is join us for 2 weeks. If you hate it, I'll give you a refund and I'll give you $20 to go buy yourself some tacos. Second guarantee is a love it or leave it guarantee. Look, it's a community. We want to make sure you like us. We want to make sure we like you. Join us for 30 days. If for some reason one of us decides it's not a fit for whatever reason, no problem. And right there, you paid your first month. All is good. The third guarantee is the crazy one. The whole entire price of working with me, if you don't make that back in the first 6 months of working together and then some, I will pause your payments and work with you for free until you do. I guarantee that the program is ROI positive for you. And if it's not, we will be working together for free until it is.
No matter who you are as a magician.
No matter who you are. Yeah. We have a small list of things you need to have completed this and this and this. But I've now had so many people come through it that I know, I'm like, if you do this and if you do this, it will work. I know that it will work.
Yeah, you know, I've never been like, I'm not an educated person. All I know is magic. I started right out of high school and my career blew up. I have never, like I told you earlier, I've never had to like work for it. And listening to this podcast, the little, what do you call them? The 9-minute clips.
The magic appetizers.
The magic appetizers, you know. At first, when I started listening to the podcast, I would go, all right, Colin Cloud, Ben Simon, David
Skip
Starr.
The short ones.
I'm just looking for names because there's 300 of them. I'm like scrolling and looking for names, right? And then I kind of got really addicted to it and I just started letting it run.
Yeah.
And from the in-between magic appetizers, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, my November, December was like my December really. My December was looking, you know, empty. And I was like, and just by what we're talking about, and because I'm getting kind of, you know, inundated with just like information with magicians and business and all that, I just did a few things that you recommended and I sold for like $15,000 worth of shows in one night of sitting there.
Yeah, one email.
Yeah. So it's very motivating. Hats off to you, man. Like my friend who's here in Ottawa, and he was like, he couldn't have been making over, you know, 40, 50,000. And now he's like killing it. He's everywhere at every gig, doing the thing, hired an assistant and all this. So it's very amazing what you've done. And I can really see the worth in having something. I didn't really understand like the hive mind mentality, the mastermind. Now that you explained it, it's a little clearer. It's amazing.
It is an incredible community and everyone's got each other's backs. I just sent an email about this, but like, you know, a big chunk of them live in the States, and you know, America's kind of funny. Like in Canada, like for you to move from Toronto to Montreal is like the biggest life decision you ever make in your life. You know, in the States, for you to move from one state to another, people do it on a Tuesday. You know, it doesn't matter for them, right? And someone's like, hey, we got a gig. Does anybody want it? $3,000 for a corporate event. I'm booked. Does anyone want it? Someone's like, yeah, it's a 3-hour drive for me. It's like, okay, perfect. Here, you take it, you know? So like these kinds of things happen, which is crazy. I never thought that this kind of thing would happen, but it's just people looking out for each other, right? Yeah. There's 2 guys that have been to Mastermind for under a year, and they're both at like 90-something thousand, right? For the year. And one of them posting the other, they're like setting a challenge, like first one to get there, like the other one owes them a cake or whatever. So now they're racing each other and sharing tactics and whatever, you know, to try to get there. So like the camaraderie is awesome. The information is awesome. Like we know how well people do. On average in the mastermind, it takes 8 to 12 months to add 50K to your yearly revenue. And that's consistent. So then again, the next year and again, the next year. That is basically what it looks like, because it's a community of people that are all got your back. And aside from the information, we do planning. We make sure we're working on the right stuff at the right time. Like there's a lot of elements to make sure it's not just me. There's other coaches that are in it that I've hired to help me help people and help people crush it. So it's awesome. It's the coolest thing I've ever made by far.
Amazing. And you're chiller, crushing it. A big thing I wanted to, and I'm remembering now my segue here was I've read a book I was a smoker. I was a heavy cigarette smoker. And I read a book called Easy Way to to Stop Smoking by Alan Carr. And the techniques in this book, he addresses the things, every smoker in the world have the same like 10 or 12 excuses why they love it or they won't be able to. Yeah, but for me, it's different because the same. He studied smokers and everybody has the same thing. And I found that your appetizers and magic and hearing, the ways from the mastermind and all that, it works the same. The book, every time you think of like, yeah, but this for me, and you turn the page and he's like, right now, you're probably thinking, and you're like, he's like, you're not alone. And that's how he does it. And for you, a couple times, I'm going to be very vulnerable here, but you said something, I think it was during one of the podcasts, and it was about ego. And I was like, I was like, yes, that's been my problem with marketing or getting out there or just doing the thing or cold emails or cold calls or whatever. There's like a lot of us have this weird, even if you make, because I've been making a good salary with magic for a very long time. So I'm like, I'm set. I'm coasting. I don't need the help. I'm good. I have my partners, my business
Agents and
and all that, my structure, whatever. It's already done. And then you're like, most magicians, they have a little chip on their shoulder of like, oh, I don't need help, or I'm known, or I'm doing. Why would I want? And you went to teach me that if you just push that aside a little bit, like people are.
It's because, let me tell you, it's because in your gut, you still believe that the way to be a successful magician is by being really entertaining and really good at magic. Right. That's why. And that's the biggest demon of this industry is people being like, I'm just going to crush this gig and that's how I'll get more gigs. And like, maybe it may happen for you. Depends on if you perform for a room full of CEOs and you crush it. Totally. If you perform for a company and everybody in the room just worked for the company, none of them are going to hire you. So you got to be able to figure out, you perform for a room full of kids and with the principal that hired you, like maybe the principal will refer you, but maybe not. And none of the kids are going to hire you, maybe for a birthday party or something. But like, it's even when we think about the best, like David Blaine doesn't run Google ads to book him, right? But he did hustle to get on a TV show. Like right. That, to get his own TV show, I'm sure was an insane amount of hustle and grind and work and whatever. And like, that's the message about this stuff is our ego says two things about this. The first is it says, I don't really need the businessy stuff. I'm doing good and I'll just keep getting better. And the other thing, which is so funny, is people say, I'm good, but I for sure want to grow, but not yet. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. I hear this all the time. And the smoker is a great example, right? I want to quit, just not right now. I want to quit. I just don't want to
get over the holidays.
Exactly. How could I possibly quit now? In 2 months, I'll be able to quit. And like those kinds of things, it's our ego, it's our body, like, reaching out and trying to like, be like, no, stay in your comfort zone, please. It's crazy out there, stay in your comfort zone. It's way better in here. And I get it. This stuff is scary. I spend more money on coaches, masterminds, and membership than I ever thought I would make in a year.
Wow.
Like, think about how crazy that is. Think about how crazy.
Wait, repeat that.
I spend more per year on coaching and masterminds.
Meaning getting people to coach you.
Yes.
Coaches.
Than I ever thought that I would make in a year.
Wow.
I just wired someone $20,000 to join a membership.
You to join them.
And it's a 1 week event.
Yeah, I've heard about those. Yeah.
It's a 1 week event.
Yeah, I've heard about those.
I learned that
oh my God,
it is about education and implementation and surrounding yourself with the right people. That's what it is, man. That nobody ever got secretly really good, and they didn't learn how to do it from other people. I learned from people who are magicians, and I learned from people who are coaches, and I learned from people who are just general entrepreneurs. And like you said about the smoking, like every worry and qualm and feeling I have, other people have had, and they figured it out. So I can do it the hard way, which is take 5 years, feel this thing, not grow, eventually try this, try that, try this. Or I can have someone who I paid a whole bunch of money stare me in the face and say, here's the answer, just do it, right? So these people, I am paying dollars to save years. And that's what people in the mastermind do. When I did an interview with Bao, who's in the mastermind, who's killing it, he said point blank, he said, this saved me 4 years. It just saved me 4 years of being.
That's what my friend said as well. He's like, it saves you. Yeah, I mean, just that is crazy.
Anyways, all of that to say that, like, I practice what I preach. I buy lots of education and communities and membership and all that because, like, for me, it's about information and it's about surrounding yourself with people that are doing way better than you so that you can go, I understand.
So this is, they say show me your 5 best friends and I'll
do the average of the 5 people you're
the average, right?
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot on this podcast. And sometimes these things, but it's nice to be reminded. It's nice to be reminded over and over and over. And I'm trying to shift. I'm working on that right now, surrounding myself with people that are successful or that they love a certain way or that are ambitious or whatever it is. But if there's one thing that came out is this. There's one thing I wanted to tell you, which hasn't come up yet. I thought it was going to. I thought I was going to be able to steer the conversation in this way. But in preparation for this interview, I had an hour-long chat with your parents.
I knew it. I knew it.
And Josh, Ben connected us.
I knew it.
So I knew about the 150 camp emails. And do you remember what your first corporate event was? For who?
For my neighbor.
What was the company?
It was an accounting company.
Part-time controllers.
Yeah.
Anyways, I have all this, nanny's name. I have all this stuff. But a big thing that I out of all the notes, I had like 3 pages of notes. Out of all the notes, I want to take one thing to, in your parents' eyes, when you came up to them and you were like, I want to do this, your mom said, we'll give you a couple of years, whatever. And they're like, there's no getting up at 10 a.m., no getting up if you're going to be in our house doing the thing. And one thing they really wanted to highlight was that your work ethic, your work ethic there at 8 a.m. at your desk. And sometimes you wouldn't go for dinner. You'd bring your plate up at your computer and work because you were doing a thing. So work ethic is a lot to do with it. I mean, maybe that's drive, maybe that's ambition, but the work ethic, have you found that you're able to tweak people's mentality around the work ethic to be more successful?
First of all, that's so awesome. We call my parents. I knew there was something. I know, I was like, Mexico. No way you remember their names. That's so funny.
They were in Mexico. Yeah.
Oh, you called them in Mexico?
Yeah, they were at a swingers convention. And no. Your dad listens to all of these, by the way.
I know. He listens to every episode. It's very nice. I think I like, it's always kind of a mystery to me because I have a couple views. The first is, I think you have to learn how to work. Like, you don't know what working hard is until you work hard. And then the 5 years later version of you is like, he didn't know. He wasn't really working hard. He didn't really know what he was doing. So I think you have to learn how to work. I think that the why of why you're doing what you're doing is the most important element to how you work on stuff. Like, it was such a good example you bringing up that quitting smoking thing, because it's like, you have to have a reason. You have to have a reason. And if you don't have a reason, then no amount of anything is going to help unless you're like, I need to for whatever.
I mean, for magic, sorry to interject, but for magic, wouldn't there be only 3 for either money, for fame, or to make people happy?
It's not as simple as that. Like, imagine that my parents told me, you have 1 year to make this work.
Right.
okay, well, now my reason of getting to a number that's good enough and being successful enough is like, they have to I have to have their approval, or I have to
Right.
be allowed, like they have to permiss me to do this and not be on my tail to go and do some math job or whatever. So I'm like running away from a math job and running towards magic and wanting to be entrepreneurial. And like, so in that case, it's like to prove to myself and them that I can do this. Right. So like, it's not just like, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want to be good at tricks. There's someone's voice somewhere, sometime that is here, that is it's what they call either the carrot or the stick, right? You're either running to the carrot or you're running away from the stick, right? So it's like one of those two things is what is motivating you. So I think work ethic comes down to the what, it comes down to what it is. And then honestly,
like what you're working on, like what?
No, I mean like, so what? Like, so, okay, I'm going to make 100K years a magician. For what? Like
Right.
one activity that we do in the mastermind is like when we set our goals for the year, for the quarter, we say, okay, selfishly, why do you want to make an extra 50K? It's like, oh, I want to go on this trip. I want to do this. I want to do that. Da, da, da. Okay, great. And then we say selflessly, like there's other people in your life that are going to benefit from this. Why might they benefit from this? And it's like, well, I can take my wife out on a trip and I can buy this thing for my kids and I can do this and I can do that. And we do that to set the why, right? To figure out like, okay, I'm motivated to do this thing because if I do, I'm going to I'll do all these things for myself. And if I do, I will prove to this person that they can, go to hell, and I can get this for my wife and I can do this for my kids and. So I think the why is important. I think what you're working on is important. But to me, this is an element of something which is mystery to me. When I meet someone and they're like, oh, I'm really hoping I can grow my magic business. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, nothing, And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, I'm just hoping that, I can grow my magic business. And I'm like, it doesn't even make sense to me. Like, it doesn't even make sense to me that you wouldn't at least post a stupid video of you doing a card trick online every day. I mean, not that that works, but it's at least, you can at least look down and say, oh, you've been trying something. It didn't work, but you've been trying something. So the work ethic thing is a bit of a mystery to me. Like, I have a lot of motivation to do things. I think the times when I don't is because when I had a lot of different things going on, that something falls at the wayside. But it's still a mystery to me.
If you could boil it down, this is going to be a tough question. Boil it down or distill it. In your experience of talking to magicians who want to be better at selling shows, what would be one or two bits of advice to, the easiest or the biggest or most important things? Get leads, or like get off your ass, or do something, or just do it. Like, what is it you think?
Yeah, I mean, leads are important. Knowing how to sell is important. Knowing operations and stuff is important. I think that if you think about a faucet, for example, it's a sort of a weird analogy, but first you have to get water flowing through the faucet. Those are the leads. Then you need to make sure that it's not, blown out all the sides and whatever, that it's going to the right place. And then you have to make sure that, I don't know, I guess stupid analogy, I'm making it up right now, but whatever, that your sink isn't exploding or overflowing, for example. So the whole thing is moot if you don't have leads. So how much you charge doesn't matter if you don't have leads. When someone is getting started in the magic business, they're like, how much should I charge? I'm like, you're thinking about this whole thing wrong. It doesn't matter. Do the gigs, get photos, get videos, get testimonials. So I think the most important thing first is figuring out how to get leads. I think after that, you start to figure out that you have to raise your rates when you're charging $100 and you're getting buttloads of leads and you're booked completely solid and everyone's saying yes. You're like, maybe it could be 150. Maybe it could be 200. Maybe it could. So I think you start figuring that out. I think marketing material is really important. It's hard to imagine it's hard to put ourselves in the view of a buyer and not a magician. We're like, everyone loves headshots of me with cards. And it's like, no, man, they just want to see the audiences just like them having the same fun that you're promising them that they're going to have. So like, you have to figure that out. And then same as sort of raising your rates and figuring out your marketing materials, like operations, like at some point you go, how the hell do I handle all these emails? And you Google, how do I handle all these emails? And then someone somewhere says, you should get a CRM. And you're like, what the fuck is a CRM? And then you Google it and then you whatever. And then maybe you buy the wrong one and you change whatever. So I think that like you can learn raising your prices and you can learn sales calls and you can learn promo videos and you can learn all of that stuff as a result of having buttloads of leads. I think probably the most important thing is figuring out how to get more people in the door. So it sounds silly and all of the other things are plenty important, but if you have 5,000 people a year knocking down your door to hire you, you're like, yeah, how good does my promo video really need to be? Like, if this person doesn't like it, the next person might, or, okay, well, I guess I can probably raise the rates because I have 4,999 people that are going to be asking me about this. So, it doesn't even matter. Like, some of the leads can fall through the cracks and you forgot about the email and you forgot about this because it's like, you have unlimited. So it's like, if hypothetically you can solve the leads problem, everything else becomes a little bit easier, but all of it, there's people that do 250K a year on 50 bookings, and that's on 200 leads. And that's because they're charging right and their pro material is awesome and the leads are from the right people. So all of it is important. But I think that I'll put it this way. I help magicians with a lot of different things. Most of them come to me because of leads. Nobody comes to me to say, Jonah, my sales process needs sharpening. I mean, it probably does. And you could book 10% more, which could be an additional $20,000 a year or something. But, no one comes to me to say, hey, I feel like my CRM isn't as good as it could be. Like everyone comes to me to say how the hell do I get more people calling me? Right. So that's probably at least feels like the most important thing.
That's some great advice. Listen, we're nearing the end of this episode, but before we get into the usual wrap-up questions, I have asked ChatGPT. I told him everything about me and about you, about this podcast and where I'm at in it and where you at in it. And I had these 4 little questions. And as I read them, I think it may be just only 2 I'd like to ask you. And they're simple ones. But how do you think, first of all, we didn't talk about, do you still perform?
Yeah, I still do. I mostly book out Ben, but I still do about, not including the public shows, I probably do about 60 or 70 shows a year.
Okay, so you're still getting out there.
Yeah, this season I'm swarmed. November, December, I'm completely swarmed. I basically do
You love performing?
Yes, with an asterisk. I love performing. I think I've been very lucky to do things like the mastermind and the podcast and whatever. And I think that I'm very excited about problem solving and novelty, and performing makes me feel really good, just being on stage and crushing it or doing mingling and destroying or whatever. But the repetition of it all just doesn't move me as much as solving a new, fresh problem. Crushing one more gig doesn't motivate me in totally the same way. So I think
the RFT tag on the business card, figuring that out.
Exactly. That's crazy. I'm this is one tip that's going to help for the rest of my life for me and lots of other people. And oh my gosh, this is amazing. Versus me crushing one more gig. I'm score. I crushed it. Anyways, let's go get a coffee and let's, go home or whatever. So right. I love it. I love magic. I love performing. But it's very hard for me to think about so I'm just going to do this fucking trick for the next 20 years. It's sort of a part that weighs on me a little.
Because your mom told me that kind of right now, your least favorite thing to do would be to get out there and perform over the marketing and over the helping people.
I don't know that it's my least favorite thing to do. I'm enjoying this season. It's great. I think I'm also I'm a real sucker for whatever I'm doing right now. And what I mean by that is I'm performing a lot this season. This season, I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm awesome. No one's better. I'm the champ, whatever. And then it's like, I'm booking out Ben for most of the gigs. It's like a month and a half until I do a gig. I go and I do a gig. It's like, okay, like it goes good. They like it, but I'm like, could have been better, whatever. And then I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I fucking doing this? Like, what am I? So it's like right now I'm in this season of I did 7 shows in 4 days, and I'm about to do another 8 in like 4 or 5. And I'm like, yeah, man, I go in there, I crush it. I have all these new lines and bits and like I'm destroying and whatever. And I'm like, I love it. And then like in the middle of February when it's quiet and I'm giving all the gigs to Ben and I'm just like, what am I doing? Why do I even have this website up for me? Like, let me just.
It's nice to know that even you get that, February kind of like, what am I doing? What's my.
Yeah, totally.
So the question that has to do with the ChatGPT question, how has hosting a podcast on Magic Theory changed the way you approach your own performances?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think one lesson that I learned from the podcast, which sort of sounds a little bit sad in a way, but I don't mean it to be so sad, is that like, just do the fucking work.
Just do the thing.
Just do the fucking thing. Like, how many more times do I need to interview someone to tell me that the way to get good at performing is by performing? It's like, bro, I know. Like, how many more most creative magicians in the world can I interview about being creative? And they tell me like, you just work on the stuff and you show it to your friends and you just keep working and you get better at working on stuff because you work on stuff all the time. And I'm like, oh, okay, got it. Like, how do you be funny? Oh, you write a lot of jokes. Okay, great. So like, I think that it's like reductive, but like sometimes I want to interview someone and I really sort of changed some of what I talk about. And now it's mostly documenting what the story is and what their life is. And I try not to ask them these like really simple questions like, how do you be creative? Because their answer is always the same thing. And I think when I started it, I wanted to get to the bottom of how to be a really good performer and get to the bottom of like, how to be incredibly creative. And I just realized that, what you work on works, right? And that's it. So I now it's more about chatting with really cool people. And I try to ask them things that are a little bit more unique, but just do the thing. I mean, that's what I learned.
And what's the best aha moment you've had while recording these 300 and some episodes? I know it's hard, but if you have to kind of isolate one of them where you were like, oh, I'm going to remember this forever, because listening to your podcast, there's a lot of things that now I'm like, I'm never going to forget that. I'm going to think about that forever.
It's impossible. Yeah. It's impossible. And also, like I said, I'm a real advocate of the present. So I'm just like thinking about the last 3 or 4 episodes. But I will say that the heart that Mario the Maker has for magic and excitement and passion and whatever, it's an episode that I recommend to a lot of people because he's got so much heart. And I love everything about him and his family and his everything and everything he does. Mario the Maker Magician.
I'm going to listen to it today.
And he just he tells these stories of like, he went to the school and he set up his show and he heard like a parent being like, that's the magician. And it just destroyed him. And so now he builds all these really cool, crazy stuff. And like, he loves watching the like kids' face light up. And he talks about how people like really put down kids magicians and that he just realized that he loves kids and he loves making them happy and making them laugh. And it's just the warmest episode ever. So like, I don't know if there's like one thing I learned or one aha moment or whatever, but like certainly him and that episode is one that just, it warms me up and I recommend it to a lot of people. And I just say like, go feel good and listen to this one.
And one little one before we wrap up, which magician, past or present, would you love to be for a day?
Would I love to be for a day?
Yeah, past or present that you love to secretly wish to be for a day. I mean, when I think, I'm like, I've accomplished, I mean, it would just, he's still working, doing 2-3 shows. Like, I mean.
But bro, it's like, I was just complaining about doing the same thing over and over again. And that's that guy's universe,
Yeah.
Like, if I was him for a day, it would be on one of the off days where he's on the island, Like,
exactly.
it would.
Can I pick the day? Or does that be
can I pick the day? I don't know. I think that, like, without being too verbose about this, but, like, if I'm going to be someone for a day, I need to have all of their training and I'll be like, I need to be them, not just be living in their body, right? Like I think about people that do awesome, epic theater shows that crush it. Like Leo Suchard is someone who comes to mind, who like his magic is awesome. He does huge venues. He's got cameras and he's got directors and he's got like people that make this show just brilliant that he's worked together with, and it's awesome. And that's all him and his stuff and his info and what he knows. Like if I was him for a day on that show, I'd be floundering. So like I would need to literally just watch it through his eyes. Like, cause I don't know everything that he knows about how he does it. So like, I don't really have a good answer for who I would be for a day. Cause I would have to not just be me in their body, but I would have to be them in their body, you know? Right. So I don't know.
That's easy. No, it's, I mean, we kind of got our answer. Jonah, this has been, this episode should be listened to by all the magicians who are into the business side of selling shows. It was so good. A couple of wrap-up questions. We always have these wrap-up questions. We usually end these episodes with. The first one is called the endless chain. In order for this podcast to last for eternity, we ask every guest to recommend one magician who they would think would do amazing on this podcast. There's only two caveats, though. First off is obviously we couldn't have interviewed them before. And the second one is you must be able to connect us to make it happen. So if I throw that question to you, anybody come to mind?
It's hard because I've interviewed everyone that I know directly, but so I'm going to pass, but I will say that this has been awesome. And I think that I will probably do this kind of thing yearly. December, pretty cool time to do it. Yeah. See if I can get some other people. You crushed it, by the way. You did a lot of it.
Thanks, buddy.
Homework, and it was awesome. We called my parents for an hour in Mexico. They wanted to be on the beach. Like, go inside, talk to me about your son. You crushed it. So I appreciate all the work that you did. But I know a lot of people have been asking me to do this kind of thing, and I never really do it. And I think it's been fun and it's cool. And usually it's just like the solo episodes are like me in a room talking to myself. So like this is a really cool way to just talk about what's going on. So I'll do this yearly, you know.
It's amazing. I'm happy to hear that. Also, we've covered a lot of ground today, but if there's one tidbit that you think people should extract from this talk, what do you think it should be? For me,
I was going to say, probably do the thing, you know, thinking about the thing is not doing the thing. Listening to a podcast about doing the thing is not doing the thing. Reading about doing the thing is not doing the thing. Writing in your journal that you're going to do the thing is not doing the thing. Only doing the thing is doing the thing. So just whatever the thing is, do the thing. I hate saying what I'm about to put
yourself out there.
Of course. I hate saying what I'm about to say, but like, stop listening to this podcast. Stop reading magic books. Stop buying magic tricks. You don't need any of it. You have everything. Just do the thing.
Also listening, I have a great little piece of advice for you that we should do is you filmed 300 and some of these with some of the best magicians in the world. And at the end of it, they all give one tip or one, what we just did right here. They're one thing that people should retain. These should be compiled somewhere, either written or audio, but it should be, because that would be the
longest time I wanted to make of all of just like most important things from every episode and the summaries and things like that. It's a behemoth of a project first. And second of all, like, I think not every interview is worthy of making it to a big hardcover book. So I may do like I don't know, pick the top 100 or something.
Yeah.
And
100 tips of, that's
I just got another brilliant idea. I think it's so cool is, you know, they talk about when you perform or when you're doing magic, like you want to think like, how would Vernon do this? Or what would Darren Brown say about this or whatever? So I thought about this idea of making a deck of cards with the face of them and some of the tips on the back that they said from the episode. And then you take a deck and you shuffle them and then you pull three faces out and you're looking at three amazing magicians and you read a bit about them. And now you think, how would I do this trick thinking about this guy says? And how would I think about this magic thing what this guy says? So I have a bunch of ideas about it, but they're just behemoth of projects, you know?
That's really good. The last question is about modern magic in the state of magic today. Would like to know one thing that you like about modern magic and one thing that you like a little bit less about modern magic, and how it affects people, or whatever you want to say.
Gosh, it's funny. Just everyone just says they hate social media magic. And I don't care. It's fine. People can do.
You know what? You were having a talk with Gazo a few years ago that I just listened to, and you really let him, he really hated it. He hates social media, and there's no merit, and there's all they all suck, and you were like, yeah, but some of them are making bank. Sure, they're not, but and the way to consume magic nowadays is this. Why would it change? Everybody's consuming on their phones that, magic needs to be appreciated live. The new way to consume magic is through these videos. So why not have these new people coming up doing magic? Sure, maybe not the best or whatever, but some people are killing it with like subscribers, and that can convert to ticket sales and money. Like some internet magicians who are not very good are making thousands of dollars, thousands every month with their little tricks.
Yeah,
so it does have a place.
I don't think so much. I don't have anything much negative to say about internet magicians. I think exposure kind of sucks, but like whatever. It's literally never had an impact on me ever. Like, just to think practically, no one's ever at any event ever been like, actually, I watched this guy that exposes magic video. It's never happened. So I'm not really super worried about it. I think what's one thing that I like about modern magic right now? I don't know. I think there's like a really cool variety of magic and magicians. And, I think one thing, this is something that I've said many times before, but the way that America's Got Talent and Fool Us and things like that have really impacted magic is that back before America's Got Talent, it was David Blaine. So if someone talked about a magician, they would talk about David Blaine or Chris Angel or David Copperfield or Houdini. And you're like, yeah, that guy's been dead for a little while, right? So they only mention one magician. Now, lay people know magicians. Like, lay people know who Shin Lim is. Lay people know who Piff is. Lay people know who Penn and Teller are. Not everybody, but I think it's just good for magic that people know that there's different styles and different types of magic and nuance and things like that. So I think that's one thing that I really like. What's one thing I don't like? I don't know, man. I like magic. I think it's awesome. There's not much that I don't like. I think one thing is people that like copy acts and copy things, and like people doing things that are obviously wrong, like copying someone's acts and lines and outfit, or stealing the trick that they released on a magic site and releasing it on some site, whatever. But it's like, I don't know, these things are just obviously wrong, and they happen in every industry. And like anybody that's doing something that is obviously wrong, like you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, like no one's like, what? I shouldn't pretend to be this person and do. It's like, no, man, you shouldn't. So like, I don't know. I love magic. I think it's awesome. I don't, there's nothing I hate.
I love magic. I love magic as well. And you're definitely leaving your mark on it with everything you bring to it. And especially, it must be so nice to come back to this mastermind, to be able to replicate success in other people's, like people, I don't know about everybody else, but when I was a kid, I was like, am I going to be able to do this for a living? How am I going to be able to afford a house if I'm doing these 300, like how many, I just was so confused, and having somebody like you to help guide me and, push me and keep me accountable would have been, not that it's too late, but, when I was really trying to make it, would have been, like Mark said, would have saved, or Bao said, would have saved you years and years.
Mastermind members this year bought a house.
It's amazing, dude. You're changing the world. You're leaving your mark. Jonah, this is amazing. Thanks for letting me do this, by the way.
This is awesome.
A lot of fun. We should do it again next year, or you should put me on your list to come back on the show, since I listened to my podcast, which was episode 3.
You were the 3rd episode, but the first recording. We recorded with you before anybody else. So
I I loved the experience back then, but I hated listening to it 7 years later.
But you were also on another episode in the live show we did in Toronto, which was you, Wes, Chris Ramsey, and was Boye on it?
Yeah, I hadn't slept in days.
I don't think so.
I was wired.
Yeah, that was a bender of an episode, but that was like
a lot of fun.
so funny. And again, you know, in the name of like doing stuff and trying stuff, like I this podcast I listened to that did like a live show, and I was like, yeah, I'll do a live show in Toronto, and like I don't know, 12 people came, and I rented it, or like 15 people came, but we had a blast. It was fun.
It was so fun.
It was really great, you know. So
keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm sure a lot of magicians out there, me included, benefit so much from everything, and I just want to say really thank you. And also, if this magic thing doesn't work out, your mom still has your bedroom untouched that she now uses as her office. But back anytime, she says.
Well, dude, thanks for you know putting in the preparation for this. It's so awesome and so funny. And thanks for taking the time to do this. And thank you everyone for listening and tuning in.
Yeah, the next episode, I'll be listening.
Bye, guys.
Well, there you have it. I hope you guys learned something. I surely learned a whole lot. I'm feeling inspired and motivated to do the things, to get to work, and to just put myself out there even more than I've already been. If you guys like this podcast, please share it with a friend. In fact, Jonah has offered $100 cash to anybody who gets Discourse and Magic tattooed on their body at any visible spot. So this is your chance. If you're short for cash for Christmas, this is your chance to get Discourse on Magic tattooed on your body. And Jonah has so graciously offered to send you $100 if you do send the proof. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you next Thursday. My name's Eric Leclerc, subbing in for Jonah Babins. Peace.